In the big history book of the Old Testament, there is a special chapter about a wise person named Isaiah. Isaiah was like a bright light that told people important messages from God. He talked about Jesus and warned everyone about bad things that could happen. People listened to him because he was like a super special messenger from God. Now, in another part of the book called the New Testament, there are more than 65 times when Isaiah's name is mentioned. That's a lot. It shows that what he said was very, very important. But even though Isaiah was such an important person, something very sad happened to him when King Manasseh was in charge. The happy story turns dark, and that's what we are going to learn about. So, get ready to journey back in time and discover how a special person's life took a really sad turn because of a king named Manasseh. This story is like a puzzle, and we will put all the pieces together to understand what happened to Isaiah. Now let's take a closer look at Isaiah's special job as a messenger from God. Isaiah started his important work around the year 745 BC. That's a really, really long time ago. Back then there was a king named Isaiah, and that's when Isaiah began his mission. Isaiah had a special ability to see things that would happen because of what people were doing. He warned everyone about what could go wrong if they didn't make good choices. It was like he had a superpower to understand God's thoughts. Imagine Isaiah standing in the middle of a town, talking about what was right and what was wrong. He wasn't afraid to say when people were being bad or when the rulers were making wrong decisions. He talked about how things were getting all mixed up in the society he lived in. People were doing things they shouldn't. Rulers were being naughty, and there was a big problem with worshiping idols instead of God. Isaiah even knew that a powerful group called the Assyrians would come and cause trouble because of all the bad things happening. He told everyone that the troubles they were facing were connected to the wrong choices they were making. Isaiah didn't just talk about problems. He also tried to help fix them. He influenced a king named Hezekiah to make changes in the way people worshipped. But even though Hezekiah listened to Isaiah about religion, he didn't always listen when it came to making good political decisions. This caused some big problems. When Hezekiah passed away, his son Manasseh became the king, and he was only 12 years old. Imagine being in charge of a whole kingdom at such a young age. Unfortunately, instead of making good choices, Manasseh went in a really bad direction. This was the start of a time filled with wickedness and people worshiping idols. It's like the story took a turn from happy to sad when Manasseh became the king. We'll learn more about what happened next. Now, let's turn the pages of history to a time when a king named Manasseh ruled over the kingdom. It's like a story within a big book, and Manasseh's part is full of darkness and troubles. His time as king is described in two special books in the Bible called Kings and Chronicles. These books tell us about what happened during his rule, and it's not a happy story. King Manasseh was in charge for a really long time. 55 years. That's more years than many other kings ruled in Judah and Israel. But even though he was a king for so long, what he did wasn't good at all. The stories in these books show us a kingdom that went through a very sad time. Picture a kingdom where people started to worship idols instead of God. It's like they forgot about the special connection they had with God. Manasseh didn't stop there. He believed in things like sorcery, which means using magic in a wrong way. The people in the kingdom were not treating each other nicely, and there was even violence. It's like a time when everyone was doing things that weren't right. The worst part is that Manasseh didn't like the messengers of God, the prophets. Instead of listening to them, he treated them really badly. Prophets were trying to guide the people to do what was right, but Manasseh didn't want to hear it. He persecuted them, which means he was very mean to them and caused them a lot of trouble. All these bad actions of King Manasseh are written in only a few verses, 18 in Kings and 20 in Chronicles. It's not a lot of words, but these words tell us about a time when everything seemed to go wrong in the kingdom of Judah. It was like a dark cloud hanging over the land. But don't worry, we're going to find out more about how this dark time affected a special person named Isaiah. Keep reading to discover what happened next in this big story. Now let's zoom in on a part of the story that's not easy to hear. King Manasseh didn't just make bad choices for himself. He also treated the messengers of God, the prophets, very badly. Instead of listening to their wise words, he chose to be mean to them, causing a lot of trouble. Imagine you have a friend who always tells you what's right and helps you make good choices. Prophets were like that for the people in the kingdom. They spoke the truth and reminded everyone to follow God's ways. But when these prophets spoke against King Manasseh's wrong decisions, he didn't like it at all. The big book we call the Bible tells us about Manasseh's violent response to the prophets. Violent response means he treated them with force and was very, very mean to them. It's like when someone doesn't like what you say, and instead of talking, they choose to be mean. Now, here's where the story takes a really sad turn. Tradition, which is like stories passed down from long ago, suggests a connection between King Manasseh and Isaiah's family. It says that Manasseh, who was actually the grandson of the prophet Isaiah, was responsible for something really terrible that happened to Isaiah. Imagine if someone in your family, like your grandparent, had a special job of telling people important messages from God. Now, think about that person being treated very badly by someone in power. It's a heartbreaking thought, but we'll uncover more about what happened to Isaiah and how Manasseh's actions affected him. Stick with the story and we'll find out the whole picture. Now let's delve into the last part of Isaiah's life, where things took a very sad and difficult turn. Imagine a time when Isaiah, the wise messenger of God, faced a lot of trouble from King Manasseh. The king wanted to make sure he stayed in charge, even if it meant silencing Isaiah. King Manasseh was so determined to keep his throne secure that he tried to stop Isaiah from sharing God's messages. It's like trying to cover your ears when someone tells you something you don't want to hear. But Isaiah was brave and he didn't stop speaking the truth. Legend, which is like a super old story, tells us that Manasseh the king challenged Isaiah. He wanted Isaiah to prove that what he said about Moses' prophecies was true. Instead of giving a dangerous answer that could harm him, Isaiah decided to run away. It's like when you play hide and seek and try to find a safe place. Now, picture Isaiah on a journey, running away from King Manasseh. It's not an easy journey, but something amazing happens along the way. Isaiah comes across a special cedar tree, and this tree is like a miracle from God. King Manasseh, wanting to catch Isaiah, orders the tree to be cut down. But here's the magical part. The tree doesn't fall immediately. It's like a shield protecting Isaiah. The tree stays strong until it reaches the exact spot where Isaiah is standing. Only then does the tree finally fall, and tragically, Isaiah's journey comes to a heartbreaking end. It's a really sad moment in the big story of Isaiah's life. Despite the miraculous protection, Isaiah meets a gruesome end, being sawn in two. Imagine a very painful way of saying goodbye. And that's what happened to Isaiah because of King Manasseh's determination to silence him. The story has moments of bravery and miracles, but it also shows us the price Isaiah paid for standing up for what he believed in. Let's keep reading to see what we can learn from this sad but important part of Isaiah's story. Now that we've heard the whole story, let's take a moment to think about what Isaiah's life and the sad end teach us. His life was like a big lesson in the school of living, and there's so much we can learn from him. Isaiah's story is a bit like a history book that tells us about the challenges faced by special people called prophets. These prophets had a tough job. They had to tell everyone what God wanted even when it was hard to hear. Isaiah was one of these brave messengers, and his story reminds us that doing the right thing can be really tough sometimes. He didn't just talk about everyday things. Isaiah's words were like a flashlight that showed people the right way to go in social, political, and religious areas. It's like he was trying to make the world a better place by telling everyone to be kind and fair to each other. Isaiah's words weren't only for his time. They echo through history, reaching us today. Imagine a world where everyone is kind to each other, and justice guides our actions. That's the kind of world Isaiah dreamed about. He wanted people who were having a tough time to be protected and cared for. It's a beautiful vision that we can still aim for today. In the end, though, Isaiah's story takes a sad turn because of King Manasseh. It's like a reminder that sometimes, when you stand up for what's right, it can be really hard. Isaiah paid a big price for being truthful, and it's important for us to remember that. His life and the tough moments he faced can inspire us to be courageous and dedicated to doing what's right, even when it's not easy. So, as we think about Isaiah's life, let's be inspired by his bravery. Let's remember that standing up for the truth, even when it's tough, is a special and important thing to do. Isaiah's story isn't just a story from a long time ago. It's a lesson for all of us today. Isaiah's life wasn't an easy journey. It was full of challenges and difficulties, especially during a time when everything seemed to be turbulent, like a stormy sea. In this chapter, we've learned about the hard and sad moments that Isaiah went through, particularly his difficult end at the hands of King Manasseh. Isaiah's legacy, which means the things he left behind, is like a shining light that guides us. It shows us how to be strong when things get tough, and how to stay true to what we believe in. Isaiah's life is a big example of moral fortitude, which is like having a strong and brave heart even when things are really hard. We've walked through Isaiah's story, and now, as we finish, let's remember to stay firm in our beliefs, just like Isaiah did. Life can be tricky sometimes, but facing tough times with courage and resilience, which means bouncing back from difficulties, is something we can learn from Isaiah. If you found this journey through Isaiah's story interesting and learned something new, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others so they can join in on the adventure too. It's like passing on a special treasure you've discovered. And before we close this chapter, remember to subscribe, like, and share for more exciting stories and lessons. We appreciate you coming along on this journey through the pages of biblical history. Thank you, and until we meet again for another adventure, keep shining bright.